Okay, I call this, sorry, right, mute. I had to mute myself there. Call this meeting to order. Thanks everyone for being here. Meeting number 14 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, December 7th. The committee is meeting on its study on the subject matter of Bill C-10, or as we sometimes like to call it, the pre-study, to a potential bill. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th of this year. The webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee and will be available on the House of Commons website for those who are tuning in from around the world. Screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. I repeat to our guests and to our members of parliament and to our staff members, screenshots or taking photos is not permitted. So just outline a few rules before we begin very quickly. At the bottom of your screen, you have the choice of either English or French interpretation or the floor. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. And of course, the platform's raised hand feature is on the main toolbar should you wish to alert the chair in case of perhaps a point of order or anything of that nature. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you for the sake of our people recording this in Hansard. And also, too, for those MPs asking questions, I remind them to please direct your question to a person that you see on the screen. That makes life a lot easier, as we know. So, that being said, we have a raised hand. Ms. de Bruzen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to seek clarification from our clerk on a matter. The member for Richmond Athabasca, Mr. Reyes, had asked the Minister of Canadian Heritage how the department came up with a calculation of $830 million that he had raised as part of this bill. And my understanding is that the department provided this information to the committee clerk on December 11th. But in our last meeting, it was posed that that information had not been received by that member. So I just wanted clarification about whether the department answer to that question had been distributed to all of the members of this committee.
Ms. Bruson, with your permission, sir.
Thank you, Monsieur Reyes. I believe I see your hand up as well.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask a question. Last week, we received a note from the analysts, I believe, asking us to send our amendments in for C10 as quickly as possible. And I just wanted to check if that was commonly done, because we're in the pre-study stage right now, not even in the study stage of C10. I didn't want to send mine in yet, but I didn't want to be seen as not cooperating. And secondly, having amendments sent in before we even hear from witnesses, in my opinion, hearing these witnesses tell us about their concerns and recommendations, in my view, is premature. So I was wondering if there's some reason why we're being asked to send our recommendations for amendments in so quickly. Because I think it might be preferable for us to take the time to listen from different testimonies from various organizations before we put our amendments together and present them to you.
Before I get to the next question, I had two different issues that I just heard from. I thought perhaps Mr. Reyes would weigh in on what Ms. de Bruzen said. Ms. de Bruzen, I apologize. I don't know if you're looking for an answer on that. Do you want to leave it at that at your statement? Okay, very well and done. Mr. Reyes, sorry.
Oh, sorry. No,
sorry, Ms.
not
de Bruzen.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I was hoping that the clerk would be able to provide that clarification as to whether the information had been shared with all of the members.
Oh, can I return to that? During the deliberations, I will give you that answer, perhaps in between witnesses, if that's okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Reyes, your point. To tell you the truth, the issue was brought to my attention about the issue of providing possible amendments. You're absolutely right in the sense that your amendments could be affected by testimony that not only you hear here. But if the bill arrives to us and succeeds second reading, then you could also be in that same position. The reason why we brought this forward was because we wanted to avoid a logjam, as it were. We wanted to avoid a backlog of amendments that come in, because we know, I suspect, that there may be a lot of amendments. I took this upon myself because I like to be in a position where I remind members about the process of the clause by clause, which can be a long process, and I would like to arm you with as much information as I can. It doesn't compel anybody to hand them in right now. If they do, that's great. I just provided the information because I know some people are new and don't know the process, and maybe they want to do that. It also helps out our legislative branch to deal with this, and not all at once, but in a timely fashion. You're under no, obviously you're under no pressure to hand that in now. And if you want to, you can, because the legislative branch is there for you, for your assistance to do your deliberations. And of course, as a critic, I think you're the critic, are you? Yeah. I believe. Okay, so you are the critic, so therefore I understand you got a lot on your plate. And that's why I just wanted to do that in advance. Now, Mr. Champoux, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased you answered that question. That was something I was wondering about as well. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Last week, I tabled a notice of motion regarding document translation. I don't want to delay the panel of witnesses because we know that that's very important, but I wanted to ensure there would be time to address, or time for me to officially table that motion. If committee members agree, there might be some debate. Do you think this would be an appropriate time?
Given the fact that we're tight for time, I'm not sure what is appropriate. To be quite honest, I'm going to leave that up to you, Mr. Champoux. You are a valued member of this committee. Wherever you want to bring it up, you most certainly can. All the clearances are there. So I'm just going to put it back to you if you want to do it now, or do you want to do it later?
Je la ferai maintenant, Monsieur.
I'll do it now, Mr. Chair, with your permission. Since it's already in the digital binder, colleagues have been able to look at it. So the motion says that all documents tabled during committee work will be now sent to linguistic revision by the Translation Bureau to ensure that all committee members may work with equal effectiveness in the official language of their choice.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Now, do you wish to comment any further? I leave it at that, and I'll let others. Anyone else wishing to comment on that?
Nous avions déjà discuté.
We had already discussed the motion quickly last week, but if anyone wants to comment, that would be fine.
Merci. Alors,
Thank you. So I agree with the principle, but I have a question. And my question is for the clerk or other staff members. Will this entail a delay for people working behind the scenes to make that happen?
Mr. Champoux?
Mr. Champoux?
Je comprends que la question.
I understood that the question was put to the clerk, and I wouldn't like to take the floor away from her. I would like to say that during our discussions, we agreed that if there were documents that were urgent, we could expedite them. And at the same time as we would receive them, then they would also be sent to be revised by the Translation Bureau to make sure that we aren't slowed down in our work.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, sir.
A lot further to add, other than the fact there was some confusion at the beginning about the Translation Bureau. There is one that services the House of Commons and the department as well. There was some confusion as different areas where one served the ministry, the other one served the House of Commons. That's not particularly the case. That was the only type of confusion that was there I'd like to clarify. Other than that, let's keep the issue rolling. Now, Ms. de Bruzen, your hand is up. Did you want to add to that? Otherwise, I see Mr. Oh, I see by your expression, I'm going to go to Mr. Housefather.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I have a clarification from my colleague, Mr. Champoux? I do quite agree with his proposal, but is he saying that there are consultants who are carrying out translation, and that if one of those consultants did the work, that it should be then revised by the Translation Bureau? That's what I'm understanding. Is that the case?
Monsieur Shampoo,
Mr. Shampoo?
Monsieur Shampoo, s'il vous plaît.
Toutes mes excuses.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Chair. What I understand is that the departments who provide us with the documents have the responsibility to provide them in both official languages. Also, often, independent organizations provide documents in both official languages. We cannot ensure the rigorousness of the translation. And that is why, given recent problems, for revision to be carried out by people who also revise the House of Commons documents.
Okay, I see by some nodding. That's taken care of. Anyone else want to speak on this particular motion?
Me?
Oh, sorry. Amy, did you want a clarification? Sorry, my apologies. Amy wanted to provide some clarification. Amy, our clerk, please.
I do apologize, Monsieur Shampoo. It's just to clarify, in the motion, it says that must be proofread first. Et si j'ai bien compris, vous avez dit...
If I understood right, you said that urgent documents could be sent to committee members, and after that, they could be sent for revision to the Translation Bureau. So is what you want to distribute documents first and then have them processed by the Translation Bureau? Or should everything go through the Translation Bureau?
Mr. Shampoo.
Mr. Shampoo, that is an excellent question. And that is why I'd like to say I don't think we should ever delay work, but I do think all documents that have to do with committee studies should be rigorously translated. Because even though a translation may appear to be sound, the meaning can change, and it's important to do business with certified translators so that the quality of documents can be guaranteed. If we receive last-minute documents, we can be understanding in that case, and we can look at them first while the Translation Bureau is revising them. And then the Translation Bureau can let us know, on this page, there was a meaning shift, for example. I want to ensure that the documents I work with and that my colleagues work with are accurate.
Okay, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Okay, no more clarifications there. I see Ms. de Bruzen with her hand up.
Yeah, my only question, just to get back to the point that I raised, I think that our clerk kind of touched upon it, was just about the public service side of things and to make sure that we're taking that into account. I think I'm absolutely in agreement with Monsieur Shampoo that we should be getting materials that are proper in both official languages. So I have no challenge on that part. It's just whether there is anything that needs to be said, because this potential as to timelines or any kind of amendment to make sure that we're not adding undue strain. That's my only point that I'm raising, is whether we need to consider anything to make sure that on the timing and exchange of documents for clarification's sake, that we need to do that. Otherwise, I'm good. I have no problem with this.
Duly noted, Ms. de Bruzen, thank you very much. However, I just want to warn people, we're kind of drifting outside of the scope of this particular motion. I don't want to go too far away, only because it is on the floor, and we have to dispense with this when need be. I'm just looking for any further comments on this issue. Seeing none, now I can proceed to the vote. Okay. Now, of course, we are in the virtual world, which means voting goes by way of something akin to negative billing, pardon the expression. We go by the naysayers. So, does anyone have any dissension to this bill? Please raise your hand if you do, virtually. All those in favor, I see. Okay, and so moved. Done. Okay, let's jump right into the business at hand, unless I see something else. Nope. So let's get moving. Back to C10, and our pre-study continues. We have 3 groups representing the first hour. Be forewarned, we're 19 minutes in, or no, sorry, we're about 16 minutes in. I may stretch this particular meeting to a level that I think is appropriate. I hope you don't mind. Let's start out with the Aboriginal People's Television Network. We have Monica Ill, Chief Executive Officer. And if I pronounced your name incorrectly, please correct me. We have Joel Fortune, who's a legal advisor for APTN. We have Dr. Michael Geist, Canada Research Chair in Internet and E-Commerce Law, Faculty of Law at the University of Ottawa, and Association Québécoise de l'Industrie.
The Quebec Record, Concert, and Video Industry Association, or ADISC.
Drouin, Vice President, Public Affairs, and Director General. Folks, we have 5 minutes. I'm afraid I'm going to have to be very strict on the 5 minutes, given that we're short of time. So first we start with the APTN. I'm looking for a hand who wished to speak first of the 2 witnesses. Madame, please proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairperson and members of the committee. Kwai, indaliwizi Monica Ile, al nambasko neodzi odanak mahogawangan. So my name is Monica Ile, and I'm an Abenaki from the community of Odanak. I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking with you from Jojage, Montreal, the unceded territories of the Ganyangahaga, and traditionally a land of exchange and gathering of many nations. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of APTN, and I'm joined by Joel Fortune, our legal counsel. Launched in 1999, APTN is the world's first Indigenous broadcaster. APTN is available to all Canadians as part of the basic service on most cable and satellite services, and we broadcast hundreds of hours of Indigenous programs each year, including national newscasts. We broadcast in English, in French, and in up to 15 different Indigenous languages. Notre programmation.
Our programming showcases the creativity of Indigenous peoples and provides a unique opportunity to share our perspectives with all Canadians. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission has recognized APTN's role in building bridges between Canadians and Indigenous peoples and increasing Canadians' understanding of us. We are very proud of the impact we have had on Indigenous expression. There were very few independent Indigenous producers when the network was launched. Today, we work regularly with about 100 of them, not counting all the creators and support teams behind them. If the CRTC had not used its powers, APTN would not exist, and Indigenous peoples would still be invisible on Canadian screens. APTN is a perfect example of a policy that was born out of the Broadcasting Act and which was implemented through hard will and good work, supported by the regulatory tools available to the CRTC.
Support the steps taken in Bill C-10 to recognize the place of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous languages in the broadcasting system. But, and this is a large but, there is a hole in Bill C-10. Bill C-10 would remove the CRTC's ability to oversee and support the distribution of Canadian programming services, such as APTN, in an online environment. The CRTC powers that made APTN possible in the first place will, if Bill C-10 stays as it is, have no place in an online world. In the case of the proposed amendments to Section 310, Bill C-10 is suggesting that Indigenous people should be supported when they carry on traditional broadcasting, but not online broadcasting. This is not acceptable. Today, we're tabling amendments that will fill the hole in the bill. We have worked with the Independent Broadcast Group, a coalition of 12 different independent broadcast companies, which includes ethnic broadcasters, local TV services, music channel, Canada's LGBTQ channel, minority language groups, and others. Without the changes we're proposing or something similar, the CRTC will not be able to ensure the fair treatment and visibility of Canadian services and apps in an online environment, including APTN. Right now, the Broadcasting Act is technologically neutral. So the CRTC does have the power to oversee online distribution, although it has exercised this power lightly. To be honest, we don't understand why this authority would be taken away. You're well aware of the impact web giants have on newspapers and how difficult it is to bring the giants into the fold. Why then would we take them out of the Broadcasting Act when it comes to online distribution of Canadian programming services and apps? In conclusion, there's much that we support in Bill C-10. The bill strives to better reflect Indigenous people in broadcasting, the importance of Indigenous languages, and acknowledges that we should operate our own broadcasting service. We fully support that aim. But for a service like APTN and other Indigenous and Canadian services, Bill C-10 as it stands does not see us playing a role in the future. And I'm concerned that it is actually excluding us from the online world. Seloni, thank you. I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Madame Hullet. I got it pronounced correctly this time. Thank you. Now we go to, there's a stranger in the house, Dr. Geis. I'm sorry, I'm just being somewhat facetious. Dr. Geis, please don't take it the wrong way. I've known you for many years, sir. You've been on many committees. I don't think I have to tell you how this works. 5 minutes, sir, and it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. And it's a pleasure to be back at this committee. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Geist. I'm a law professor at the University of Ottawa, where I hold the Canada Research Chair in Internet and E-commerce Law, and I'm a member of the Centre for Law, Technology and Society. I appear in a personal capacity representing only my own views. Now, as you may know, I've been quite critical about Bill C-10. However, please understand that criticism of the bill is not criticism of public support for film and television production. Support through all levels of government is essential. Rather, the question is whether Bill C-10 is the best way to provide that support. And having carefully studied the bill, I'd argue that it's not. I'd like to get started by pointing to 4 broad concerns. First, there is no free lunch. What appears to be free, as in new free money for the sector, comes at an enormous cost, and not just to consumers in the form of higher bills at a particularly difficult economic time. I recently was engaged in a debate with Janet Yale of the Yale Report, in which she acknowledged that broadcasting policy restricts consumer choice. So we know there will be a cost to consumers. Less understood is the cost to creators from the bill. Loss of fundamental principles such as Canadian ownership and control of the broadcast system. Loss of the predominance of Canadian talent, the risk to Canadian intellectual property, and the short to medium term risk of less production due to an uncertain regulatory environment. Second, the bill punts many of the most important details, leaving it to lengthy processes at the CRTC or secretive cabinet decisions. The level of uncertainty, what's not in the bill, is astonishing. Legislation is supposed to remove uncertainty, and this does the opposite. Now, the minister has said he plans to issue a policy direction that could cover everything from exclusion of video games to an IP policy to revisiting the definition of Canadian programs. Respectfully, that simply isn't good enough to meet the kind of transparency standards that the government has long set for itself. Indeed, there is so much unanswered that it will take years to sort out, and creators will have to wait at least until the latter half of this decade for the promised benefits. Third, this isn't about leveling the playing field. I've written extensively about the advantages enjoyed by conventional broadcasters, whether simultaneous substitution, market protections, must carry rules, or copyright retransmission benefits. There is no like for like here. Fourth, with all due respect, some of the claims about the bill simply don't stand up to scrutiny. The minister has told the House of Commons that the bill contains economic thresholds when it doesn't, that it excludes news when it doesn't, that it won't affect Canadian ownership requirements when it will, that the entire process will somehow be completed by this year, which it quite clearly won't, and that it is similar in approach to what's been implemented in Europe when it isn't. These aren't inconsequential issues. As you may know, I've written a 20-part series about the bill that I'd be happy to table with the committee. With more time, I would delve into the many issues that raised in that series. They include concerns about the approach of regulating all internet streaming services anywhere in the world with some Canadian subscribers, and then working backwards by saying that some might be exempted in a process that will take years to unfold. That simply just doesn't work. The registration and data disclosure requirements would still apply to all, and the inevitable result would be less choice for consumers and less revenue for creators as services block the Canadian market or simply license their content into Canada. Moreover, the risks to Canadian intellectual property are enormous, potentially making Netflix and Amazon the kingmakers of Canadian content and leaving Canadian broadcasters with leftover scraps. In my last minute, how can we fix this? 3 points. First, thresholds in the legislation are essential so that rules only apply to the largest companies that have a real and substantial connection to the Canadian market. Second, a transparent approach on critical policies is needed before the legislation is passed, not after. No bill should create more questions than it answers. Third, there is a solution that would put money into the hands of creators this year, not in 5 years. I think we all want large internet companies to make an appropriate contribution in Canada, and we have a system for that. It's called taxation. Tax revenues can be used however we want, including in direct support for film and television production. Government could say 30% of these new revenues go directly to the sector. That doesn't require changing the core policies of the Broadcasting Act. It doesn't require a secretive policy direction or years of litigation at the CRTC. It doesn't lessen competition, increase consumer costs during a pandemic, or decrease choice. And it doesn't create huge uncertainty in the market for the foreseeable future. Broadcasting Act is an essential piece of legislation, not only for the film and television sector, but for all Canadians. We all deserve better. I welcome your questions.
Here before, I asked for 5 minutes. He just gave me exactly 5 minutes, right on the nanosecond. Thank you, sir. No pressure, Madame Drouin. Up to you for 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Ça va.
Bonjour.
Good day. I hope it hasn't been subtracted from my 5 minutes. Before I get to my text, which I will try to go through as quickly as possible, I'd like to highlight the fact that Dr. Geist spoke on behalf of my name personally, but I represent an organization of organizations, and I'm also co-president of the Coalition for the Diversity of Cultural Expression that represents thousands of artists and organizations. And we are all of the view that this bill must be improved and must meet certain expectations that we have held for a long time. Now, I will move on to my statement. So, who are we, ADISC? I'll put on my music industry hat. ADISC is a professional association that has existed for over 40 years. Our companies are independent companies, mainly based in Quebec, that support national and international development of careers of song and music artists, most of whom are Francophone. Our mission is to support this cultural and economic sector, let's not forget that, through the implementation of a business, legislative, regulatory, and financial context to foster its development. In a little over 40 years of history, our music and our song have been able to take off. First and foremost, thanks to the talent of our artists. Secondly, thanks to entrepreneurship of our businesses, but also thanks to a set of important cultural policies, including the one that APTN spoke about. Let's look back at 40 years ago, long before the digital reality. In music, the sector was dominated by a few foreign multinationals. The music offered to Canadians by these companies consisted of offering them music by stars from elsewhere, and with a few exceptions, in presenting French-language versions of foreign hits. Even today, these multinationals are part of the landscape. They're represented here by Music Canada. They play the same role that they played regarding production, and they're a little more invested in Canadian culture, but almost exclusively Anglophone culture. Businesses are completely absent from French language production. Our national French production is almost all done through independent Canadian companies, including the ones that I am representing before you today. The sizes of these two business segments are not comparable. There are small businesses and huge multinationals. Despite this great disparity in resources, Canadian artists, particularly Francophone artists, represented by independent companies, have been able to achieve great success, but all of this would not have been possible without the implementation of a series of government measures. Let's take the example of radio. A number of decades ago, the Canadian government imposed measures to ensure that Canadians could listen to their local artists on the radio. And this allowed the artists to become popular among Canadians, and then if Canadians wished to, they could buy a record or a concert ticket. Without this invaluable showcasing, the virtuous cycle of development would have been impossible. Even today, this privileged access of artists to the Canadian public through radio makes a huge difference in the careers of Canadian artists. Other forms of music consumption have emerged, Spotify, YouTube, over the past 15 years. And it is urgent that the government act and provide the CRTC with the powers to be in line with these new innovations. Bill C-10 is not perfect yet. You have the power and the duty to improve it, to make it more robust, to more adequately protect the promotion and development of original French language production. For example, to reinstate the requirement for maximum use of Canadian creative resources by all players, give the CRTC the power to act on all aspects of the system involved in the distribution and broadcasting of cultural content, and not to weaken the system's monitoring mechanisms. And we are looking forward to the bill moving on to second reading, and I'm ready to answer your questions.
Merci, madame.
Thank you, ma'am.
I've never done this before, but I think it's worth mentioning just very, very quickly to everyone. I just noticed that since we are culture, arts, heritage, cinema, this is what we do here at the committee. This is what we study. I just noticed the passing of Christopher Plummer, the actor. Christopher Plummer was not only an international star in the world of acting, he was also, and equally so, an incredible ambassador for this country of Canada. So I guess I would like to take this upon myself to say, on behalf of the committee members, sympathies to his family, and rest in peace. Nevertheless, let's get on with our questioning. As I mentioned earlier, I want please say who you're addressing your question to. That makes life a lot easier for us and the people handling this world virtually, of course. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to questioning. We start with 6 minutes from the Conservative Party. Mr. Waugh, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the three groups that have come in front of us today on Canadian heritage. Dr. Geist, I've looked through your 20-part series. You've been the most controversial person, if you don't mind me saying, in the country towards the broadcasting bill, C-10. You talked about it for 5 minutes. We could probably hear from you for an hour, but you spent a month dissecting this bill. You feel it is deeply flawed. You gave us some reasons why, but it's going to have a major impact if it is passed through the House of Commons, and I'd like you to comment on that.
Sure. Thanks for reading, and thanks for the question. I tried to highlight a few of the things, and I think the impact will be felt across a number of different kinds of stakeholders. From a consumer perspective, as I noted, what this is going to do is going to decrease choice and raise costs. There will be services that will not enter the Canadian market. This will particularly hit multicultural communities in Canada that often rely upon different services from other countries that stream in. Many of them may look at the associated regulated costs and say they're simply not interested in entering into the marketplace. Less choice, higher cost for consumers at a difficult time. from a broadcaster perspective, I think it actually puts many of them at a disadvantage as well. They're going to have to compete with some of the large companies like Netflix and Amazon for Canadian content. They're going to get outbid, and they're going to be left with intellectual property that isn't the very best, because that's going to be scooped up by some of their American counterparts. And they're going to find themselves in a difficult position because streaming services, even Canadian streaming services, will be able to get foreign capital. They'll still be restricted and not have access to the same kind of capital. And from a creator perspective, I want to emphasize again, this is going to take years. Anyone who's done anything at the CRTC knows you were talking about lengthy hearings, followed by judicial review, followed by the prospect of more hearings. It will take at least half a decade to get this sorted out. And so from a creator perspective, there aren't a whole lot of gains to be had, certainly not in the short term. And it's somewhat ironic, given that the sector, at least pre-COVID, was enjoying robust financing, and in fact was record-setting amounts of film and TV production in Canada.
I agree with you there. The minister and the Liberals have talked about comparing this to what they do in France, what they do in the UK, what they're trying to do in Australia. You feel that's misleading in this bill, and why do you feel that?
It is, because it simply isn't what's happening. The reference point is often to the European Audiovisual Directive, but we should be clear. There are only 4 member states, Denmark, Germany, Sweden, and the UK, that have currently transposed the directive. That means there are more than 20 member states that haven't even moved forward with it. And if we take a look at the kind of obligations even the countries that have implemented this have done, they're far different from what is being proposed here. Denmark, for example, has a 2% direct investment requirement. It's a far cry from the 30% that the minister has been thinking about, and there is no content quota at all in Denmark. In Germany, the levy runs between 1.8 and 2.2%. Spain is thinking about a 5% requirement. Plus, the dollars are just dramatically different compared to what the government is thinking about when it has its $1 billion that it talks about in terms of new gains, compared to what is being imposed in Europe. And it's an in-apt comparison more broadly, because the requirements apply across the EU. We're a single small market. And so if you've got an obligation that can be spread, let's say 1% across nearly 30 member states, that is very different from the same 30% on one country with 37, 38 million people.
We don't feel the 835 million that the minister claims will be the windfall in this from streaming providers. We don't share the enthusiasm with the minister on this because there is no accountability with the 835 million. We've asked for the information now. We've heard that it's coming. But at the same time, when we talk to companies like Disney and Netflix and Amazon and Apple,
Point of order.
They don't see this at all, Mr.
Point of yes, Ms. DeBruzen, please.
Just as a point of clarification, not that it's forthcoming, the point that was raised is that it has actually, in fact, already been shared months ago.
Okay, thank you, Ms. DeBruzen. So I'll leave that at that. Mr. Waugh, back to you.
Yeah, so the 835 million that they claim will be the windfall from these streaming companies, and the concern here is, where does it go? And we can't find out, other than we've heard that they have brought it forward now, but they're not shared when you talk to Netflix, Amazon, Apple, and so on. They do not share the robust 835 million that they may be in charge of in bringing extra money to Canada.
Yeah, let me respond with a couple of things. One, it's great that that information was provided to the committee months ago. It would be even greater if the Canadian public had access to that information, and that the fact that so much of this data has not been provided about the implementation, about even some of the analysis to the broader public, I think has been problematic with all respect. In terms of the money, a lot of it is not even new money. These companies are already investing hundreds of millions of dollars in Canada. We know that because we've seen increased spending in film and TV production in Canada in recent years. Much of that is coming from foreign-based services. And so what we know will happen is, in the short term, many of them may cut back because of the uncertainty as to whether or not it will count for the purposes of these new requirements. Once they then figure it out, it's just going to be shifting dollars from one pot to another. The idea that this brings in all this new revenue simply isn't the case. And in fact, we run the risk as well of certain services that might otherwise come into the market and invest, saying that the Canadian market isn't worth the hassle. That's less money for creators and, of course, higher cost and less choice for consumers.
The
Okay,
CRTC has
Mr. Waugh,
Okay.
I'm going to have to leave it at that. I apologize. Ms. Ian, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Ely, I'd love to start with you, if I might. You said that there is a big hole in Bill C-10. So as a trailblazing broadcaster, I'd like you to specifically, if you can, tell us how APTN would be impacted by the hole that you described.
Thank you for that question. So as you know, APTN is mandatory carriage. So right now we get 35 cents per subscriber per sub. So we do have a place in the landscape, and it took time for us to get there. I mean, when APTN started, we were way far in the BDU's dial. I mean, you'd have lots of snow before you get to APTN. There was a discoverability issue right now then. But with not having the CRTC oversight of having APTN discoverable and accessible in the online platform, well, then the BDUs probably will not want APTN to be there. They were obligated before, and we're very thankful for that. But we will not be in the online world. So we are available right now direct to consumers with our OTT platform, but I think you need way more than that. You know, when you're a broadcaster, you want to share your stories, right? You want to entertain people, you want to inform people, you want to bring reflection, you want people to have a better understanding. So if we can transfer that to online, then what's the use? Our stories will be there, but people won't access them. So it's a question of future. It's our future as a broadcaster for our stories. Cord cutting is happening. We're seeing a decline in our revenues as well. So it's all this. Our revenue is declining, and we won't be discoverable.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Ms. Ely.
Thank you.
Ms. Duran, I want to go to you now. You say that Bill C-10, there is a lot that you agree with, but that it is not perfect yet. Those were your words. Can you tell us maybe one or two ways to make it more robust, in your opinion? You're on mute.
Yeah, I know, I'm trying.
That's okay.
Madame, you're on mute encore. Oh, you almost had, there you
there
go.
we go.
Bravo. Okay.
Yeah.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Évidemment, le projet.
Of course, the bill is not perfect. It's not perfect, but it lays down an important step in this new regulation that must be put in place. For us, in the culture and music industry, we have been waiting for this bill for, I would say, 20 years. Ever since the CRTC decided not to regulate the internet. We were thinking in 1998 that was a very poor decision, and we expected for the internet to expand in this way, and today we find ourselves in this situation. Cultural consumption has moved towards online services, including for music, in the case of Spotify and Netflix for television. It is important for the bill to introduce into our Canadian system a way to welcome foreign companies, but the Canadian character must be preserved. So all companies, even foreign companies, who are now considered to be under CRTC purview, must prove or demonstrate that they are using maximum Canadian resources. That section is one of the is Section 3.1f, and there is a new proposal in the bill. And what we want is for the former part of the Act, so Section 3.1f, to say that all users of the system must prove maximum resource use of Canadian resources for TVA or for CTV. It's necessary for us to be able to see that companies are using maximal Canadian resources.
Okay. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Drouin.
Mr. Geist, there was a laundry list of things that you told us that you didn't like about the bill, about Bill C-10, and how Canadians would be impacted and the level of secrecy and all of these different things. Just wondering if there's anything you do agree with.
Well, I think there's value unquestionably about re-examining where the Broadcasting Act is. I think that what this seeks to do, and I think we're seeing it even in a couple of comments that my fellow panelists have made, is by claiming that this is all one system. The internet's the same system as broadcast or television and radio, and we can have the same rules apply. The problem is that it isn't. You know, the longstanding policy we've had in broadcasting, you've been you're a longstanding broadcaster, those policies were premised on scarcity of spectrum, of the privilege of having those licenses and the requirement to give back. The internet is different. There is not the same kinds of requirements. There's far more expressive potential. There's far more opportunities for creators and for consumers alike. And the problem is when you try to put that square peg in a round hole, sorry, just let me just finish the sentence, Mr. Chair. When you try to put that square peg in a round hole, you end up with exactly the kinds of things that was mentioned.
Thank you.
The inability, for example, to require Canadians to be predominant.
Dr. Geist, I'm really tight on time. Let's go to Monsieur Champoux, s'il vous plaît. Now, I understand you are splitting your time with Madame Desbiens. I just need a nod. Oui.
Changement de programme, Monsieur le Président.
We're changing the agenda for technical reasons. Ms. Desbiens has given me her speaking time, so I'll be speaking alone.
D'abord, un gros merci encore une fois.
First, a great big thank you to all witnesses for being with us today. I won't be able to ask as many questions as I wanted to because we're short on time, but I appreciate everything that you've brought up in our discussions. I'm looking forward to future discussions, and I assure you of my unwavering support. I would like to speak to Ms. Drouin from ADISC. Of course, we were talking about the French language and how to ensure that original French language content production is protected in the regulations to be determined by the CRTC. We were discussing that because we're not sure what form those rules will take. Could you give me your point of view on this? How should we ensure that original French language content production is conserved? You're still on mute.
D'accord. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for the question. Thank you for letting me continue. Mr. Champoux, I've been at ADISC for 30 years, about as long a time as Mr. Geist has been at the University of Ottawa. And it's been 30 years that I have not agreed with him, but that's not a problem. I would like to bring to everyone's attention the fact that there's not an area in our world or our economy where we are before faced with infinite choice. When you go to the grocery store, you don't have all the types of carrots in front of you. And when you go to buy a car, you don't have every single car ever made on your market. There are controls to the market available to us, and that's true in every sector. I think there must be a positive bias that is favorable for our culture. And it is completely normal for that to be done. And going against what Mr. Geist said, there are rules and techniques that can achieve that. So there still is a good reason to put regulations in place to protect our Canadian content. And that is true more than ever. In Canada, on our own territory, why should we not showcase our Canadian and French language content? During the pandemic, we've seen how important it is to have access to our resources here. Take the example of vaccines. You can look at what's happening elsewhere in the world. We don't want to miss opportunities. Our culture is here, and the tools that distribute culture must be up to the task. We have been looking forward to this bill, and measures must be put in place for all Francophone art, including music. The bill must be changed in Canadian policy to give more importance to promoting and developing Francophone content in sections 3, 5, and 9. Hopefully you will have an opportunity to look at that in detail closely, because I think it is essential. And I don't think there's anything in the internet universe that would make that inappropriate. Go ahead, Mr. Champoux. I have another question for you, Ms. Drouin. You have significant experience in CRTC hearings. Do you think it is realistic to give the CRTC 9 months to carry out hearings and to implement this bill? That is a tight deadline. The mountain is high, so work must begin. And work must begin somewhere. In 9 months? No, of course not. It won't be finished. But priorities can be established. Certain sections, certain aspects can be dealt with first to put certain things in place quickly. I know the music sector. Mr. Geist is less familiar. Let's look at Spotify, YouTube, other online music distributors. If those organizations contributed, that would make a huge difference in our sector and would bring us more funds. But of course, in 9 months, not everything will be done, but it's necessary to start working. Another question. It was proposed to deregulate traditional broadcasters. What effect would that have on your industry? Well, still this morning, I had a meeting with our members, and we were talking about commercial radio, and still today, it plays a driving role in developing artists' careers. And as long as that is the case, we will fight, because they showcase our French language, culture, and music. There are other services. Oh, thank you, ma'am. They must also come and contribute. Thank you very much.
6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses. This has been very, very interesting, and I have had the opportunity to speak to many of the witnesses outside of committee, and so I have got some perspectives, I think, that you've been able to give me, and I'm interested in hearing your response to some of the questions as we go forward. I'm going to start with the Aboriginal People's Television Network with Ms. Ill. You talked about the hole that was put, that is in this bill in terms of support for the APTN, and that you do have some proposals that you're putting forward for Bill C-10. Could you very quickly walk us through the changes you're proposing and how you feel those changes would fix the hole you identified?
Certainly, I could start talking about two of the changes that pertains directly to APTN or Indigenous-owned media and Indigenous people. So in the clause 310, they refer to a system for Indigenous people as programming undertakings, that they could carry on programming undertakings. But when you say that, you exclude online activities. So we don't understand why that word would be used. So preventing us to virtue an online activity. So we definitely would want that to be changed to broadcasting undertaking. So this is just, I find probably hopefully an oversight, and this could be fixed quite easily. And definitely to add within the broadcast, a definition of the word Indigenous people. As you know, Indigenous is one big word, and it pertains to First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. So it'd be nice just to add this definition to show recognition and acknowledgement of the different nations. I could ask Joel to go through more in details of the other ones. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Monica. I'll do it very quickly. So the Act, we worked very carefully with the structure of the Act and what the department proposed for Bill C-10 and how the various powers of the CRDC works. So we really focused in on what we thought were the absolutely essential powers that the Commission could have in relation to programming services as opposed to Canadian programs. And so we proposed changes to the new Section 9.1, which is the CRDC's ability to make orders that affects online services. And we're suggesting that the ability to make programs available should also extend to programming services to make them available and discoverable. And similarly, the requirement that another issue relates to the current requirement that distribution undertakings make certain programming services available. Well, if you look at the Act, a distribution undertaking, by definition, excludes an online service. So that's just crazy. If you have one type of distribution undertaking using one technology, you can make a service available on certain terms and conditions, but a service using an internet technology, you can't do that. Well, that's just crazy. So we're suggesting that section should be changed. Similarly, the Commission's regulatory powers are very important as to it's the underpinning for the whole system, its ability to make regulations. So we've suggested that certain regulatory powers that right now, again, are limited to distribution undertakings, specifically excluding online services, should have the ability to relate to broadcasting undertakings, which would then include online services. So there's a couple little definitional questions, but they're very, very important. And we've also addressed that the way the Act works. You've got two sort of major sections. You've got policy and you've got powers, and you have to have both sections. You have to have a policy that relates to a power and a power that relates to a policy. It's great to have, highfalutin policies, but unless there's specific powers that the Commission can use, they really don't mean anything. So and vice versa. So we've suggested a specific policy section that would relate to online services when they're distributing other services. And it's essentially that they treat other services fairly and make Canadian services visible. So just some basic objectives for online distribution of Canadian programming services. Right now, the Act is completely silent on that point. That's a major flaw. Then finally, we suggest a modification of the existing language which deals with Canadian ownership in the system. Essentially, we're suggesting that the Act, we shouldn't just remove it. That seems excessive. We should certainly recognize there's tremendous value in protecting Canadian ownership in our own broadcasting world. Can't believe the Act wouldn't have that. In addition, we think it's important to recognize the diversity of voices and especially of independent voices in that section. So all of those pieces work together to fill the hole that Monica identified.
Yeah. Well, and I guess maybe if you could speak to, are there examples? When we see this, we've heard about different countries and what they are doing. Mr. Geist spoke about that, but perhaps you could talk a little bit about any countries that you've seen that are dealing with online distribution that we could use as a roadmap, I guess. Maybe Mr. Fortune, could I pass it back to you again?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the United Kingdom is looking squarely at this issue right now. Ofcom in 2019 delivered a report to Parliament, I think it was, recommending that their legislation be amended to deal exactly with the issues that we're identifying here, which is ensuring suitable prominence and fair treatment for certain UK services on global platforms made available in that country. That was in 2019. It went up to the House of Lords. Fairly, they're not known as the most radical people in the world, but so they thought it was a great idea and they recommended that those proposals be adopted. And right now, the UK Ofcom is looking at that exact issue in an ongoing consultation. It was launched in December, and people are providing their comments on this issue, that certain key UK services, and there's quite a few of them, it's a different environment than ours, certain key UK services should be offered on global platforms, should be treated fairly. There should probably be some backstop provisions to ensure fair treatment. Sure, there's policy issues around this, but that's what they're looking at. That's their job. They're the regulator. And our regulator should have the same job, certainly no less capable than Ofcom. Our act should let them do it.
Thank you, Mr. Fortune. Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Folks, that brings us to an end for this session. We had the time for the full first round, 6 minutes each. I have to draw that to a close. We have to take a break for our next guests. I want to thank our current guests in front of us, Madame Drouin, Dr. Geist, Mr. Fortune, and Madame Millet. Thank you so much for joining us in this round. So we're going to suspend for a few minutes. Please don't turn off or disconnect from this. As you know, technically, once we get our next guest going, we will start right away. Thank you again to all. pre-study of C10 or passes the House of Commons. If it does, I can make a few comments. Screenshots or taking photos of your screen, again, is not permitted. That's for our committee members and our guests. Please do not take screenshots. Please, before speaking, wait until I recognize you by name. And when you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. For interpretation, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either whatever's on the floor, or you can switch to either English or French interpretation. Please, when you are not speaking, put your mic on mute. These are all the universal Zoom rules that we've been under for the past year, almost a year. And of course, I want to welcome our guests. So now we have two participants today. We have two guests that we want to hear from, and we want to thank them for joining us here on a Friday afternoon. We have from the Friends of Canadian Broadcasting, Daniel Bernhard, who's the Executive Director, and Union des Artistes, we have Sophie Préjean, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Pascal Saint-Ange, and Julien Laflamme, all from Union des Artistes. So what we do now is we have 5 minutes each for your remarks. Unfortunately, I have to be a little bit strict on that. I'll let you clue up your thoughts, but not much beyond 5 minutes if we get there. So we're going to start with Mr. Bernhard from the Friends of Canadian Broadcasting. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. I think we... Oh, if you could just unplug it and plug it back in, I was told. The headset, that is, sorry. How's that?
All right, you tell me. Is that better?
Well, I can hear you, so we're good.
Okay, thank you. Monsieur Président,
Mr. Chairman, honorable committee members, thank you for inviting me to appear before you today. Friends is a citizens movement that advocates our cultural identity on the airwaves and online. Our work is funded exclusively by citizens, and therefore the only interest we have at heart in this process is the public interest.
Canada is an idea, and without sovereign media, that idea won't last. In 1932, the Conservative government recognized the power of radio to reinforce Canada's political, economic, and cultural independence. And they also foretold how an unregulated broadcasting system would turn this power against us, imposing American ideas and American ideals onto Canadian culture and politics. Nous avons pris soin de...
We have been careful to protect our cultural institutions, but the pervasive presence of GAFAM continues to threaten them. Ottawa has turned a blind eye to the distribution of illegal content on many of these platforms and has allowed foreign digital broadcasters to get rich on our territory without contributing to the production of local content and without paying their taxes. Thanks to these companies and the inaction of Canadian governments, our democracy is now weakened and our society increasingly polarized.
Minister Guilbeault pitched Bill C-10 as a solution to at least some of these problems. And if we judged it by his comments alone, Bill C-10 would be a wild success. But reading the text itself, it's clear that Bill C-10 is not exactly as advertised. In fact, the bill that should regulate digital broadcasting could in fact leave Netflix, Amazon, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify entirely unregulated, just as they are today. Now, the good news is that Bill C-10 can be fixed, and we have formulated 19 precise amendments that would cause the text of the bill to more closely resemble the minister's account of it. Tout d'abord, abordant...
First of all, let's address the issue of Canadian content. We agree with the philosophy that, by default, digital broadcasting should not require permission. However, offering the option to the CRTC to regulate platforms like Netflix is insufficient. The CRTC should be obliged to regulate digital broadcasters of a certain size.
Mr. Guilbeault promises to address this by order in council, but that's a temporary approach which future governments could undo without parliamentary scrutiny. You can't accept this bill on the promise of an order that you haven't seen and which may not materialize. It's important to strengthen the bill itself. Second, social media and algorithmic decision-making more generally. We agree that people who create and upload content to the internet should not require a license to do so, but we can achieve that without exempting companies like Facebook, YouTube, and Pornhub from responsibility for the content that they broadcast. These companies routinely broadcast illegal content that would land any other broadcaster in court. The exemption for user-generated content should apply to the users themselves, not to the platforms who make billions curating and promoting this content. Now, the Broadcasting Act alone cannot hold the likes of Facebook fully accountable for its transgressions, but it would still help to remove C10's blanket exemption for social media sites and to revise the new concept of programming control to specifically include decisions made by algorithms. Third, C10 removes Canadian ownership requirements, paving the way for Fox and other American interests to swallow ailing Canadian broadcasters, decimating local programming, especially local news. We need not invite the further decimation of local news in Canada. Finally, Bill C10 is completely silent on the CBC, which could soon be the only national media of consequence left standing. You could use this opportunity to revise CBC's mandate to be fundamentally non-commercial and to finally end political appointments for the president and the board. In closing, I urge you not to waste this precious opportunity. We may not get another chance like this for years, and most Canadian media won't survive that long. Just this week, Bell Media announced hundreds of layoffs, adding to the more than 3,000 media layoffs in Canada since COVID. Let's make things right now, while we still can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now go to Union des Artistes, and I need a show of hands who wish to speak first. I'm seeing Madame Préjean, s'il vous plaît. Pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Please go ahead for 5 minutes. Thank you. First, I would like to introduce the Union of Artists to you, but first I will give the floor to Pascal Saint-Onge, who will speak about the National Federation of Communications and Culture, the FNCC. So, I could let you know that Union of Artists is a union that has existed for decades in Canada. It is acknowledged and recognized by our government. We represent actors, but also singers, dancers, television personalities. So that is 4 categories, but there are also subcategories such as puppeteers, comedians, etc. All of these wonderful people who are creators and who are the vehicle of our culture on stage and through the media. I wondered for a long time how I would speak today about this principle that I wish to share with you. It is the principle of identity. And I decided not to write anything, but to speak in a more natural, organic way because it felt more natural to express it that way. Broadcasting and telecommunications regulate music, TV series, the news. It's extraordinary. Oh, Pascal, did you want to introduce the FNCC?
D'accord. Excuse-moi, j'étais en train de t'oublier, Pascal. Donc,
I'm sorry, I almost forgot Pascal. And so, you know that TV is one of the most popular medias. Radio is extremely popular in our homes, in our vehicles. It belongs to us, it resembles us, and it transmits our values. It reflects our identities. So it is a mirror effect that we see in radio and television. And this must be recognized. The value of recognizing our identity must be recognized. Now, the digital area is taking up more and more space. And I would like to mention a phenomenon that is having an impact on the mirror effect. The mirror is shrinking. And we have a concern. One day, will the mirror be so small that we will no longer be able to recognize ourselves in it? That would be extremely drastic. We know today that thanks to this mirror, we can better understand the other, we can better see ourselves reflected. I will come back to this later. So the act should strengthen certain values, and I will speak to how the bill should strengthen certain values, and I will give the floor to Pascal right away. Sound quality does not allow for interpretation.
Sorry, I have to interrupt, Ms. Saint-Ange. There's a quality issue with your microphone. I'm not sure if the audio we're getting doesn't seem to be picked up by the microphone on your headset. Can you unplug it and plug it back in?
Oui.
Est-ce que c'est possible?
Est-ce que c'est mieux comme ça?
No.
Est-ce que c'est mieux comme ça?
I'm afraid we have the same problem. And unfortunately, with translation, it's very difficult they're telling me it's not possible. I don't know if you can, at the bottom of the screen, you will see that there's an arrow next to the microphone button. If you go to the left.
When I'm clicking on it, I'm connected with the
headset.
The headset that was sent to me by the government. So I'm using your equipment.
So you have checkmark headset for microphone.
Yes, and I have done the technical test yesterday, and everything seems fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry, madam, but at this stage, it seems translation cannot understand what you're saying at all, only because it sounds quite distant. I'm not obviously saying that what you're doing there is wrong, just that we just can't pick it up. So we have about a minute, 20 seconds left. I'm going to have to put it back to Ms. Préjean for now, Madame Saint-Ange, and I sincerely apologize for that. If you wish, Ms. Saint-Ange, you can call IT to clarify that, because we do have a round of questioning coming up, and in that time,
yes,
maybe we can...
I have spoken to them, so yeah.
Merci. Madame Préjean, back to you, please. Or perhaps... Go ahead.
Oui, en fait, j'allais dire les chantiers sur...
Perhaps we could move on directly to questions, because I would like for Pascal to be able to finish. But I would like to talk about the fundamental priorities for us. They are Canadian property, of course, French language, our talents of workers, artisans, and artists. We want to see them better protected, more involved in projects in Canada, and give resources to the CRTC that the CRTC needs to put a more effective system in place, and give the CRTC the resources it needs. And of course, content must be able to be traced. And another point for us is the powers of the Governor and Council. In an ideal world, it would also be best to get into the habit of revising the Act. If we realize that there are loopholes, we must be able to react quickly. In the current situation in Canada, I'm saying we should become more proactive regarding the digital reality. It hasn't always been easy. In the future, it would be important to find a way, I was going to say, to ease things, but if we could work before the fact. Thank you.
Situation with Madame Saint-Ange, our apologies. Monsieur Reyes.
Mr. Reyes for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses who are giving us their time today to come and testify before a committee. My first question is for friends of broadcasting. Mr. Bernard, I'd like to hear you speak about social media and in Bill C-10. I find this fact very worrisome. Is it worrisome for your organization too? Yes, of course, Mr. Reyes, and thank you for the question. There are two implications that concern me regarding the exclusion of social media from the law. First, the responsibility regarding content that is broadcast. It said that if the act doesn't apply to social media will not be responsible for its content. And when there is sometimes illegal content, that is problematic. Mr. Chan spoke to you about efforts by his company to rectify the situation, but there are many examples of Facebook executives consciously deciding to allow illegal content to be consumed on their platform. So it's very important to rectify that. Secondly, the responsibility for discoverability and other CRTC rules. For example, discoverability of French language content, but also for election advertising, among others. So there are other elements in the bill that must apply to social media, and including them is very important. Thank you. I would like to ask you a second question. Bill C-10 eliminates Section 3.1, which could stop foreign companies from taking more control. Could you comment on that? Yes, we recognize that the system has changed. And it's impossible to put up a wall between us and everyone else. It's necessary to work together with foreign broadcasters, but we must also promote Canadian property, but also Canadian accountability. Having executives, broadcasters, and companies who are accountable to the CRTC and to Parliament for their behavior. So having someone here in Canada who overlooks the behaviors of companies is extremely important. And we must also encourage Canadian property. That is vital for fostering new production. There's a crisis currently, and we do not want foreign entities to purchase our companies and potentially close them. Section 19 on the Income Act says that since the 1960s, if foreign property is purchased, there are different policies applied to Canadian companies. This doesn't seem to have been applied to digital companies. So Canadian companies then are not currently included. Do you agree with me there? Yes, I do. And we have a suggestion, in fact, to improve that situation, though not to correct it completely. It would be to change the definition of broadcasting in the Interpretation Act, because that is the act used by government authorities. And what could that do? Well, it could improve the current situation where foreign companies have a commercial advantage over Canadian companies because their products do not have tax deducted from them. This represents billions of dollars from our tax money that could be sent to the government when Canadian companies purchase their advertising abroad. My next question is for the working document tabled by our other witness with many recommendations. I looked at those recommendations, very well done. When I look at page 2, I see that you mentioned for the Union of Artists that there should be stronger protection of French. And you talked about paragraph 3 was unacceptable because it would be moving us backward. Can you give me more details on that, please? Ms. Préjean or Ms. Saint-Onge?
No, madame, I apologize. We're into the same situation now. C'est le même pour le microphone. Apologies. We're going to have to, Madame, sorry, I'm not taking any time away from you, Mr. Reyes. We have about a few seconds left. If Madame Préjean wished to get someone else, or perhaps she'd like to answer that herself, we have about 20 seconds left.
Merci.
Thank you. Perhaps Julien could continue, if need be. Yes, absolutely. That is one of the requests we made. The worst thing that could happen currently would be for us to move backwards. There is a language barrier in work, as you know, and it seems extremely important to us to preserve all creators, workers, authors, performers who we represent, support them in their work. And if foreign money were to come in, it seems it would be difficult for us to preserve them. So the bill needs more bite. Perhaps Julien could add something.
I'm sorry, I have to move on to our next. We're already past 6 minutes. Yeah, you can work.
Oh, okay. Pardon me.
Become Monsieur Laflamme. So now we go to, I believe Ms. de Bruzen is up for 6 minutes. Is that correct, Ms. de Bruzen?
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I get to some questions to the witnesses, because there's clearly a lot of interest from all of the witnesses who've been before us so far, and we've seen a lot of people putting forward requests wanting to be able to present at committee. And I'm not sure if I'm going to have another chance before the constituency week to put this to the committee to ask if they would be ready to add an extra hour on Fridays so that we have a chance to hear from more witnesses and do the important work. Now, I understand that the members of this committee have generally shown a great interest in this work, having done this pre-study and saying that they're interested in moving forward with C10. I put that somewhat in brackets because I was surprised to see that the Conservatives have brought a motion this afternoon, in fact, to withdraw C10 and to have it fully pulled. But luckily, I am happy to see that that did not go forward. I am presuming that the members on this committee still have an interest in doing the hard work on C10 and to be able to hear from as many witnesses as we can to be able to move forward with this bill. So I was wondering if we would have a chance to maybe right now see if I can get agreement from the different parties to add on one more hour. As far as context, I'm also going to add that we will not have a meeting on February 15th. So because of Family Day, so we're actually losing one day of witness testimony coming up. So it would be very helpful for us to be able to have that extra time.
Mr. Bruzen, before we do that, I just want to, because we don't have committee business scheduled here, what I'm going to do is, I'm assuming you'd like to use up your time to have this discussion, and I can allow other members to, I just stopped your time, but if you'd like for other members to add to that what you just said, I'm going to use your time to do it, just to let you know, until we run out and go to the next questioner. Do I see anybody from...
Sorry, I was going to say I'm absolutely fine with that because I believe that what we're seeing overwhelmingly from people who work in the industry is that they want us to move ahead with C10. That's what I'm seeing from the number of people who've put their names for it to speak to it. So I would really
okay.
love to see how we can work to do this.
Thank you, Mr. Brusen. But you have about 4 minutes and 30 seconds left. I'm going to open up the floor, and I see Mr. Reyes wants to speak, and I recognize him, and I'll resume with your time. Mr. Reyes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find what Mr. Brusen brings up very interesting. However, I'd like to highlight that the witnesses are here. I wouldn't want to encroach on time for asking them questions. I have a number of concerns. I think at the beginning of the next meeting, we'll have time to speak about her proposal. We'll also have a meeting next week, Monday and Friday. But for adding 1 hour to a Friday meeting means that we would have to add even more work on each of us. And I'm concerned by one more aspect, and that is for interpreters who have all spoken to us about the weight of their task. And Friday is the end of their week too. And we are trying out different techniques through this new reality. So I am worried about adding a third hour. That said, Bill C-10 is important. Nothing bothers me about adding another meeting. I think that the Bloc and the NDP and ourselves, we would all agree to add another meeting on the end so that we can hear from all witnesses.
Okay, merci. Just hold on one second. Now, Mr. Brusen, I have two other people who wish to weigh in. You opened the floor. I'm going to have to ask Ms. McPherson and Shampoo. They have about 3 minutes in this time allotted. Then that would give some time for Madame de Brusen if she wants to. But again, folks, I have to be strict about this. I've stopped the clock right now, but we have 3 minutes left in Ms. de Brusen's time. So I ask that you please be quick about this. So I'll start this clock again. Ms. McPherson.
But Mr. Chair, may I please respond
one
to that
second.
by Mr. Reyes?
You'll get a chance after I hear the other two.
Mr. Chair, I just wonder with the witnesses here, if it would be possible for us to have a extension of the meeting after our witnesses are complete today, or maybe even prior to the next meeting. I find it bad that we're having this conversation while we have witnesses that I'd like to talk more with.
Monsieur Shampoo.
Monsieur le Président, je partage un peu.
Mr. Chair, I share Ms. McPherson's opinion. I don't think it's suitable of us, especially given that Bloc and NDP witnesses were planned. I'm somewhat frustrated to see this point being raised now. And I agree with Mr. Reyes's, or rather the suggestion that we add time before the next meeting for this debate. I don't think that it's relevant to do this while witnesses are here.
Madame de Brusen, you have 2 minutes.
Mr. Chair, that's why I put this fully within my time, and I'm not raising it within anyone else's time. But I will also point out to the point that was raised by Monsieur Reyes, the extra hour is in fact the time that is open to us in consultation with the committees as to when we can have extra time. So that, as I understood it, there was a slot that was possibly available to us for extra time on Fridays. That's why that spot was chosen. And you are absolutely correct to point out that we do not have the ability to slot meetings wherever we want because of the challenges that we are facing.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
And Mr. Shampoo, I hope this is a point of order, but I will rule on it, but nevertheless, please proceed.
En fait, vous jugerez, je vous laisse...
I think we've gone over time allocated to Ms. de Brusen. So if I may, either we should pick that time back up at the end of the meeting, or we should go right back to the topic of today's debate.
Mr. Shampoo, let me just stop right there. There are a few seconds left in Ms. de Brusen's time. I've granted her 6 minutes to do this. All right. One
So,
moment.
Mr.
I've been,
President.
Mr. Shampoo, 1 second. I've just been asked by the clerk to suspend for just a few moments, just a few moments, and she wanted to clarify something. So I'm just going to suspend for just a few moments, back in just a few moments. Just returning, we have a couple things to clarify at the end of this meeting. One is about the motion that Mr. Shampoo said. Now, if you wish to carry on that discussion, here's what I'm offering. If you want to continue on with that discussion, we can. And I'll try to do it within the time frame of about 5 to 10 minutes past the scheduled end of the meeting. So if you want to do that, we can. In the meantime, it was Ms. de Bruzen's intent to use her time to discuss this issue. She has a few seconds left if she wished to conclude. However, I did see Mr. Shampoo wanted to talk. Now, Mr. Shampoo, did you want to finish your point of order?
Je voulais simplement préciser, Monsieur le Président.
I just wanted to specify, Mr. Chair, that you stopped the time allocated to Ms. de Bruzen, but that doesn't stop the meeting from nearing its end. So I'm concerned about the time we're losing. And I'd like to get back to the witnesses we invited for today.
Truly appreciate your concern. Thank you very much. And I am trying to be cognizant of time here as I try to juggle many things. I'm going to return now to Ms. de Bruzen, who has approximately 20 seconds left.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to check in with the other parties to see if we can make extra time, because I know that witnesses do want to appear and we need to be able to make that extra time for them. So thank you.
Monsieur Shampoo, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Shampoo, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank our witnesses for their patience. I'm sorry for that delay. It happens sometimes. I'd like to ask Ms. Préjean a question. In your opening remarks, you used an image that I found great. It was the image of a mirror. It's very worthwhile because it's true that television and media in general influence us. They influence our culture. And in a cultural context such as Quebec or the Francophonie in Canada in general, can you talk about the risk that we are running by not being so strict enough in regulating broadcasting as a whole? In fact, I'd like you to go into more detail on your opening remarks. Yes, certainly. I could speak to you about the French language because that is the language in which our artists do their work. But the Union of Artists also has a section for all other languages other than English in Canada. So I could speak to you about other languages than French also that are endangered. Of course, I believe that television has this obligation to bring together the people who watch it. And that idea, in my opinion, should not be ruled out, should not be removed, rather, from this bill. And that's what I wanted to bring up with my mirror image. I find it hard to imagine what TV would become if that notion were not strengthened in our legislation. I sense the danger. I'd also like to speak to you about the Francophone sector, because I'm an expert in that. People follow French TV shows, they listen to their French music, and this notion is far more important than language or expression. It's much more collective than that. It's part of our societal fabric. And that's why I brought up the ideas of bringing people together and resembling what we see on TV. But in this bill, we don't see that notion of language. And that is certainly a shame, given the geopolitical situation in Quebec surrounding language. And that is why I find it is a shame for this notion not to be included in the bill. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask a question to Danielle Bernard from Friends of Canadian Broadcasting. There's a concept that is difficult to understand for many, and that is algorithms used by social media. You know more about it than I do, so can you tell me a little about the important role that algorithms play in social media, and how can we ensure that social media don't play tricks on us when they program their algorithms? Can you comment on that? Yes, of course. The bill speaks about decisions and the responsibility of decisions made by broadcasters. In the future, most decisions will be made by machines, by algorithms. So let's take the example of discoverability. Programming is not a choice made by humans, it's a choice made by machines. Companies who work with these machines must be held responsible for the decisions of the machines. As soon as they're able, given that they can program the machines, it's not acceptable for them not to have any responsibility if the decisions made are not legal or responsible. So we need to increase responsibility on companies for their own algorithms. Don't you think we should have access? Are algorithms like secret recipes or secret treasures currently that companies don't want to share? How can we ensure more transparency? I hope we can ensure more transparency. I'm sure companies consider their algorithms to be extremely valuable. Let me give you an example of a company that or rather, I don't think. So you think that online algorithms can be created to ensure that local content, Francophone from a certain region, for example, is showcased on the platform? Yes, exactly. That is possible. And they must show that they have the good faith to follow the rules. They must demonstrate their good faith. That's very important. And CRTC carried this out with traditional broadcasters. And something similar should be applied to digital companies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. McPherson, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank our witnesses for joining us today and sharing their expertise with us. I apologize for having to sit through some of our committee discussion. And I want to just start, I think, with Mr. Bernard from Friends of Canadian Broadcasting. You have done a very deep dive into C10. You've done an awful lot of work around this. You've come today with 19 amendments. Could you expand on 2, 3, maybe even 4 of those that you think are absolutely crucial for the success of this bill, please?
Sure. Thank you very much. I will speak to 2 of them, if you may. And in the first instance, I have to find myself agreeing with Professor Geist, which is a rare and, in this case, fortunate opportunity, that thresholds for the regulation of digital broadcasters really should be...
Mr. Bernard, I apologize for interrupting. As you can, I think you probably know why. We're having an issue with your audio as well now. The interpretation's having a hard time understanding it. Something may have switched. I don't know if you want to do what you did prior, which was to unplug your headset and plug it back in again.
How's that? How's that?
You want to keep going, please?
Sorry about that. Yeah, the thing keeps cutting out. Can you hear me now? Yes? Okay. I'm getting some thumbs up, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, from them, but you need to hear from me because I'm sitting here with the interpreters. 1 second.
Absolutely. I'll keep talking.
Yeah, thank you.
And hopefully it will register.
Okay,
So,
okay. Yes, now we have an interpretation thumbs up on that.
Thank you. So I have to agree with Professor Geist that thresholds are very important. The new law, according to the minister's comments, would force or compel companies like Netflix that have substantial operations in Canada to invest their fair share in the production of original Canadian content. But actually, the law doesn't do that. What the law does is clarify that the CRTC has the option to impose these types of contributions, but it doesn't compel them to exercise that option. And like Professor Guy said, that's extremely problematic. And so we would like for the bill to clarify that once a broadcaster, a digital broadcaster, exceeds a certain threshold, whether that is by users or revenue, that is appropriate to their unique business model. Once they surpass that threshold, that regulation and obligations to contribute become mandatory. Because as the law is currently written, the CRTC could continue doing exactly what it is today and still be in compliance with the law, and we find that problematic. The second point that I'll end on is about social media, which I mentioned earlier. The law has a categorical exception for social media sites, and this is hugely problematic. The idea that we should not force little Timmy uploading videos from his bedroom to have a broadcasting license is, of course, one that we support. But Facebook and little Timmy are not on the same level. And so these companies should be responsible for the content that they broadcast. They should be responsible for rules around political advertising, advertising standards, emergency alerts, and all other measure of rules and regulations that are subject to the Act. And I'll give you an example of why. Mr. Chan last week again said that Facebook takes great measure to take down this content that is illegal. Well, he should tell that to Mr. Trottier, Chris Trottier from Vancouver, who opened up his phone in March of 2019 to Facebook and saw 51 people being murdered in real time in New Zealand right in front of him. And Mr. Chan says that Facebook doesn't choose what you see. You connect to it and it's your choice. Well, I promise you, Mr. Trottier did not ask to see that. It was pushed to him, it was promoted to him. That would be legal for any other Canadian company to do, and Facebook should be no exception.
Thank you very much. That's important, and I think that making sure that the CRTC is given that direction is vital. The other thing that I know that you have commented on, that you've said Bill C-10 is silent on, is the mandate for CBC. Could you speak a little bit about what you're asking for us to consider or to update within Bill C-10 on CBC's mandate?
So just a brief note of context. The private media in Canada is falling off a cliff. And it's falling off a cliff because successive governments have allowed their competitors, mostly Facebook and Google, to do things that would be illegal for them to do. So they don't pay taxes, they can broadcast illegal content, they don't pay for the content, they sell ads against, on and on and on. So there is a huge crisis in Canadian media, and right now the CBC is looking like it will be the only man standing, basically, if things continue as they are. The CBC, we believe, should have its mandate clarified to say that, one, it is fundamentally non-commercial. We have seen CBC management freelancing with increasingly desperate attempts to sell advertising. Tandem is the latest result of this. It's outrageous. We should clarify that it should be fundamentally non-commercial. And second, we should say that there should be independence. There are accusations of bias against the CBC. I personally believe they are unsubstantiated, but even the perception is not helpful. And so ending political appointments to the board and for the president is very important and something that can be done here. And finally, we should mandate that CBC have local news coverage across the country. there are, with all due respect to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, there are more CBC bureaus in Newfoundland than there are in Alberta. And there are like 6 times more people in Alberta. So it's important that the CBC have a mandate to distribute its resources equally across the country. And we think that there's a good opportunity to do that now, especially considering the growing importance of the CBC, given the decline of private media in so many parts of the country.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Mr.
folks.
Chair, I believe that's my time.
Yep. Thank you so much. I'm going to have to call it a day at that point because we're running short on time and we still have committee business to tend to. So therefore, I want to thank our guests from the Union des Artistes. We want to thank Madame Préjean, Madame Saint-Ange. I apologize for all the technical difficulties that we had to go through, and also Monsieur Laflamme, also Daniel Bernhard from Friends of Canadian Broadcasting, and also Solange Drouin. No, that was from the former one. Sorry, we just had the 2 witnesses. So I want to say thank you again for doing this. And now we proceed. We need to go back, committee members, to Monsieur Champoux's motion. What we need is some operational clarification. So a few things were said, but there were no amendments. And I moved on to a vote, and perhaps that was prematurely, but we need to seek some clarification on 2 matters. But before I do that, I need the unanimous consent to bring back the motion into play. So do I see anybody who dissents? No? Okay, so let's bring back Mr. Champoux. So here's the situation that we have. 2 things we need to clarify in Mr. Champoux's motion. And we'll get, by the way, we will get to the situation that Ms. de Bruzen brought up earlier about scheduling in just a few moments. But I need to deal with this first. And one of the issues, of course, has to deal with the documents, that all documents presented, and if I'm getting this correctly, and I'd like you to weigh in for those of you who talked about it before, we're talking about non-federal government documents that are being fed into the committee. I turn to Mr. Champoux for his opinion on that. Is that what we are discussing here?
Selon ma compréhension, Monsieur le Président.
According to what I understand, the documents provided to us. Can you hear me? The documents provided to us by the departments are internally translated by those departments. That is what I've understood. And I consider that to be valid. However, there are documents that come to us and don't seem to have been translated with the same rigor. And these documents, or rather the documents that go through the clerk, have been revised, I would imagine. But there are some documents that are not subjected to the same rigor. So I'm saying that all documents should be subjected to the same rigorous revision. I don't know if a standard already exists, or a threshold, for example, to ensure that the translation has been certified. No matter what the mechanism used, I think all documents presented to us should be sufficiently revised.
Other.
Oui, je crois que c'est...
Yes, I think that was the clarification I asked for earlier from Mr. Champoux. I think that now we should really talk about the matter of previously. So if documents were asked for previously, and what Mr. Champoux said was that we can be sent the documents and then they can be revised. And if they are revised and errors are found, then the reviser can bring our attention to the page number, for example, even though we've already had a look at the unrevised documents. So I understand that the goal wasn't to delay things by sending things for revision. Can Mr. Champoux clarify?
Monsieur Champoux.
Écoutez, c'est certainement une question d'interprétation.
Well, it certainly is a a question of interpretation. But I think the idea behind the motion, for me, was a no-brainer. All committee members should be able to work together with rigorously, properly translated documents that have exactly the same meaning in both languages. So if you'd like for us to remove the word previously and to replace it with systematically, perhaps, I think that saying préalablement in French or previously was fine, but we can replace it. And regarding last-minute documents, they can be revised and see if they are approved after revision. I think last-minute documents would be exceptions.
Yeah, I think so. That goes to the heart of the second matter, which would be, of course, the distribution. I was going to get to that later, but I think you may have just clarified that one because we do need precise language on how we distribute, to make it feasible in light of time. But I want to go back to the first point again. So instead of saying you want the motion to read as that all documents, not just the non-federal government documents. Mr. Champoux.
J'ai présumé que
I presumed that what we got internally was already translated by high standard translation. But when I say documents, it includes those coming from outside because those we receive internally already have been rigorously translated.
Yeah, we need to get wording to that effect, Monsieur Champoux. That's what we're trying to seek, just to clarify the first part. Would Mr. Housefather?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm just so that everybody understands. I'm a bit confused again. Mr. Champoux, maybe I'm wrong, has said that he believes that the Translation Bureau translates all of the documents that come from ministries. And I don't know, is that the case? If it is not the case, then we need to clarify that because...
Sorry, Mr. Housefather, I didn't mean to cut. Go ahead, finish your thought.
No, so for example, I have no problem and I agree. First of all, everybody should get the documents in correct English and French. I'm in total agreement with that. I think quand c'est un document qui vient d'ailleurs.
When it's a document that comes from elsewhere, from a third party, I fully agree that it should first be revised by the translation service. And this may or may not be the case, but if there are people within departments, translators, who are part of the Government of Canada, but who do not belong to the House of Commons Translation Service, I think we should accept those documents. And then afterwards, if the House of Commons translators can revise them. But I may be mistaken, but I think there are other translators in other departments that are different from the House of Commons ones.
Sorry, I'm going to ask Amy to join us, but it is my understanding, yes, that it is all under one house. I don't mean that in the House of Commons. I mean it's all under one house as far as the translation is concerned. So this is why, Mr. Champoux, I keep bringing it up, and I apologize because you're talking about something that was not of good quality that came from a department that you took issue with that went through the members of the committee. So since we have one shop that does the translation, that when it comes to all documents, you take issue with those documents as well as documents that we get from the outside coming in. Mr. Champoux.
Tout à fait, Monsieur le Président.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. It's a question of assurance. There was an incident that happened. It wasn't very consequential. It was a very short document, but I just want to ensure that documents that come to us go through a revision. I'm not convinced that everything that comes from departments will come to us after having been rigorously translated. I'm asking for this specification in our policy, and I think it's very logical to do so. It protects the quality of French, but not only that, it protects the quality of English and the conservation of meaning. And if departments do business with the same translation bureau as the House of Commons does, then that's great. But we must find a way to ensure that things are done in a rigorous way. I'm all for the discussions that we're having, but the wording that we're using was the wording chosen by our clerk and approved by our clerk. Therefore, I mean, we can beat around the bush with this, but I'm just wondering about what concerns people have with this motion. I think this helps everyone to have high-quality documents on hand. I thought everyone would appreciate this motion.
Yeah, trust me, I don't get the feeling that we're questioning the intent of it. It's just a question of clarification that were brought up at the beginning of the meeting. Monsieur Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to hear what you just said and what Mr. Champoux just said, because I think it's very relevant. All of these questions are very relevant because we don't want to delay our work, but we're also in a country that by law has 2 official languages, and that means that all documents must be of the same quality. And Francophones are the minority in Canada, and if things were the other way around, but they're not. But if things were the other way around, I don't even think the question would be asked. Therefore, I think we must find a way. What Mr. Champoux said to me is very clear. If documents don't come through us internally and we can't trust the translation, they must then go through our trusted translators. And that way, we are certain that translation is done properly so we can properly do our work in both official languages. It's the smallest thing we could ask. We need to be proud of our 2 official languages, and this must be enforced.
That we are, sir. Since we are short on time, may I propose this? May I work with Mr. Champoux? May I work with you on the clarifications of some of the things that we've been talking about offline? And then we can come back, visit this at our next meeting, and I will allot time to do that. We may run into overtime, but trust me, as Mr. Reyes pointed out, if this was the other way around, how it would be handled, I have no idea, but I want to make sure that it's handled evenly across the board. So that's why I'd like to take this under consideration, what you're saying, and we can clarify what we're talking about because of the one situation, especially when it comes to departmental versus House of Commons translation. Mr. Champoux, can I do that?
Monsieur le Président.
First, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask you what we were doing during the first hour of the committee. You asked if anyone was against the motion. Did you ask for a vote on the motion at that time? I thought the motion was approved earlier.
Yes, it was approved, but I asked for unanimous consent to bring it back, which I received. And the reason why I brought it back, not because I'm questioning its intent, is just that I did have a few questions from the table here about some of the other issues that were brought up by Ms. de Bruzen. I believe Mr. Housefather may have mentioned something as well. I just want to get well, I guess you would call this some operational definition as to what you want. So the operational clarification is what I was looking for. That's why I brought it back. In other words, I'm not trying to push this aside for its content. I'm just trying to make it right, to make sure that the instruction is there for our committee, our table here, our clerk in particular, to know what the instructions are. Yes, sir, I apologize, and maybe that's my own fault, but there is some confusion here about this. I'm hoping to clarify that with you so that we can get this done right. And at the next meeting, we can have this discussion to see if we can vote on an amended to amend this, and if all in agreement, we can vote on it then. Mr. Shampoo.
Monsieur le Président, je vous...
Mr. Chair, I must admit, that this wording was approved by the clerk. It was deemed acceptable by all members earlier, though it was done so quickly during the first hour of the committee. I would ask you to put it to a vote, please. I would like to vote on it because personally I don't think we need to work on this any further. I think it's a very basic motion, so I'd like to vote on it.
Okay, so you're moving the motion as is once again. Before I do that, though, I want to go... 1 second. Mr. Housefather, go ahead. You're on mute, sir.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Maybe I'm confused also. I thought we adopted the motion and that Mr. Shampoo was being asked to clarify what exactly the intention was to see if there's anything in the motion that was different than the intention. I think now what I understand is every document that was not translated by the House of Commons Translation Service before coming to the committee should go to the House of Commons Translation Service. So if that's the case, I'm okay. I just needed to understand that. I think we all needed to understand that. Moi aussi, je suis prêt à voter.
I'm also ready to vote again on the motion if you want to pass it. I thought it was already passed.
That's not what... Okay. For point of clarification, Mr. Housefather, that's not what it says. It says all documents. What you just alluded to were all non-federal government documents. There is one institution by which the department sends off to translation, as well as someone from, say, this committee sends it off to translation as well. So what you're voting on here now, what Mr. Shampoo put forward, has all the documents, all of them, including the governmental one as well. But what I heard earlier, I'm sorry if I'm confusing the matter, what I heard earlier was basically the intent was, and all kind of agreed to it, was that we would do this for non-federal government documents. So that's why I brought it back to the committee. That's why I asked for unanimous consent to put it back here. Now, I see I've got two people speaking, but I'm going to have Mr. Housefather, go ahead.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chair. I think we're perhaps talking past each other. That was exactly the question that I asked before. Were there other federal translators that were hired by the federal government outside of the Translation Bureau doing translations? If that was the case, then there would be an issue perhaps, because then you would have one federal translator having to go being checked by another federal translator. Now, what I understood from you was that there is only one group of federal translators, which means they're already translating the documents before we receive them. So then there is no issue. Then the only documents that need to now go are the ones that are external. That's my understanding from the clarifications offered. So I think the initial motion was fine.
Before I answer that, Mrs. Shampoo.
Je pense que Monsieur Housefather...
I think Mr. Housefather clearly answered your question, Mr. Chair. Once again, I would ask for us to vote on this, and also I would like to come back to something. I'm not sure if we have the verbatim of the meeting, but I'd like to go back to the moment when you asked for unanimous consent to come back to this motion. I don't remember having given my consent to bring back the motion that I thought was already passed. That might be my mistake.
Yeah, the way that normally goes is, as I mentioned, for those of you who do not, for those who disagree, say so. So if I ask for unanimous consent, I'm asking for those who don't agree. I'm just going to ask Amy one question here that may give you some clarification. If you could suspend for just it'd be less than a minute, I promise. 1 second. I'm just going to ask, how do you feel? I'm going to ask Amy to explain what she explained to me earlier. Like, maybe I'm not phrasing this right, but Amy, do you want to just tell them what you just told me? I'm going to refer this to the clerk for now to give her explanation as to why we're having some confusion over all documents coming in. Amy.
I apologize sincerely for belaboring the point. I hear what you're saying, and what I'm hearing, if I'm understanding correctly, is that you're not looking to have documents re-looked at by the Translation Bureau. Have I understood that point? If they've come from the Translation Bureau, be that me sending it or be that the government sending the committee material, what I've understood is that you're not looking to have it re-verified. That's what I've heard. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Unfortunately, the wording as was adopted literally says that all documents presented as part of the committee's work be edited and proofread. Just that part there, that all documents. The only concern I have with this, I'm happy to do that. I am happy to send everything to the Translation Bureau for verification. There is a verification step. It's not retranslation, it's verification. I will do that. I will follow the committee's instructions to the letter. I just want to be clear. The only concern I have about that is if perhaps 3,000 documents were requested and furnished by the government in both, furnished by the department, my apologies, furnished by the department in both official languages, I, rather than distribute those documents to you, would then have to go to the Translation Bureau and have them verified, and then I would be able to distribute them to you. As long as that's understood, I'm happy to follow the instructions.
So just, thank you, Amy. Very quickly so, but it's not where we're trying to steer in a certain direction, Mr. Shampoo. We're just trying, there were concerns about this brought up that goes to Amy's point that we want to clarify. So Mr. Shampoo, you have the floor.
Alors, je veux rassurer notre greffière.
So I would like to reassure our clerk that I certainly would not ask for documents to be resent back to the Translation Bureau that were already translated by the Translation Bureau. To me, it's not worth changing the motion because that much was already clear. But if you would like to make that amendment to clarify that, then you can go ahead and make that change. But I thought everyone already understood that what had already been to the Bureau didn't need to go back to the Bureau.
Voilà. Alors, j'espère que ça.
I hope that that is clear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Madam Clerk, I just want to again, just perhaps you could give a clarification again. My understanding is if they have now come from the minister's offices, their original translation was done by the same Translation Bureau. If that's the case, the way the motion reads is that any documents must be edited and proofread first by the House of Commons Linguistic Services. If they're the ones that did the initial work, it was already done by them. It doesn't say it has to return to them a second time. So my belief is, based on what you and Nick Cherebeek said, the motion is absolutely clear. It's only those that were not originally translated by the Translation Bureau that then should be sent to them. If that's okay, Madam Clerk and Mr. Chair, I think we're good.
Go ahead. Okay. Okay, if that's the will of the committee, then I have no, we're running really late, so I'm just going to run, Mr., where'd you go? Mr. Shampoo, do you want to go ahead with your original motion that you wanted to do? Just to add to what Mr. Housefather just said, the reason why we did that was because we were getting different messages from the comments that we were getting that steered us away from the wording of your motion. We now have some clarification of what your intent is, greater clarification. And if you want to move on this motion, you most certainly can once again. Did I see Mr. Aitchison with a comment?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. As this goes on, I want to point out, Mr. Shields has lost his connection, so I don't know if that changes anything here, but part of me is jealous of him having lost his connection, but here we are.
Okay, so, sorry, can you hear me? All right. Just one moment. So since we were looking for operational clarification, the motion then stands. We can end it at that. If you still want to proceed with your same motion, as long as everybody is on the understanding that all documents pertaining to, and as what Mr. Housefather pointed out earlier, but we all understand that they all come from one place here, departmental, House of Commons, so on and so forth. You want to proceed with the same motion? Then we're fine. We can just re-adopt it as is. Okay. And so ordered. All right. Sorry for the confusion, folks. Now, in the few minutes that we have, do you want? I have a couple things that we could do here. We could meet offline to talk about extra hours, or not, or we could bring it up at the next meeting. I could carve out some time to talk about that if you so wish. I'm looking for some input on that. Mr. Aitchison.
Can we bring it up at the beginning of the next meeting, please?
I thought you might bring that up. Very well then, Mr. Reyes.
Exactement. Donc, je propose qu'en début.
Exactly. So I propose for the beginning of the next meeting for us to have an in-camera time allotted, and we'll be able to discuss it. I don't think we should extend our meeting. It's Friday. Everyone's tired. So let's do it at the beginning of the next meeting.
I will carve out some time, and we'll talk about that, whether we're going to do that or not. In the meantime, as you know, have a great week. Next week is constituency week, and of course, Monday is a holiday. So we'll see you in 2 Fridays from now. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.